Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. My name's Kevin McCaffrey, and I'm here with the other guy who does it, Adam Amawala. What's up, Adam?
How you doing? I like that you're holding a pen. For those of you only listening, Kevin's holding a pen, which is very like Jon Stewart-esque. It
Yeah.
means that you're thinking of something. Yeah, exactly.
I have
I,
things
it's
to
I
cross
like the
off.
look. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I still handwrite. Is that chuggy? Is that an old person thing? I feel like at some point we're going to get to a point where children do not write with their hands. I think at
No,
some point.
I got ridiculed for writing in cursive for years. I still write in cursive. People think
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
right. That is interesting. You're probably one of the youngest people who write in cursive, who is not also a part of a royal family, I assume. I've got thoughts to write and cross off today. We're going to talk about the Ricketts a little bit because there's some I feel like some discourse kicking up online. And if you want to follow us online, follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
We never tweet in cursive. We promise.
It's true. It's all just print. So I'm gonna do a deep dive into some facts about how the Ricketts spend in a little bit here, because that is directly correlated to the future of the Cubs as they have this rebuilding going into something of a rebuild or a reload, TBD. How the Cubs proceed is definitely going to be impacted greatly by the Ricketts and what they're willing to spend. So I do want to talk about that a little bit, but before that, I think we have some other fun things to talk about. You want to start with the fun, Adam?
Sure. I mean, we we continue to see the inventive ways in which a team can be 500. Like that's
Hmm.
kind of my takeaway from this team is that over the past week and really over the past month or so leading up to the trade deadline and just with how much the Cubs have struggled, there's been and as people who are very much in the Cubs Twitter sphere, there's been a lot of negativity, rightfully so, about the impending sell-off, trade-off, whatever you want to call it. And yet, over the past week, we have arguably two of the best wins of the season coming in extremely dramatic fashion, both in the ninth inning. On Saturday, specifically with, nobody out, nobody on, coming back against the Diamondbacks, which is something that has happened to the Cubs before in that very stadium. I don't know why I remember this, but I think it was Hector Rondon. Goldschmidt hit a walk-off three-run homer. So
Yeah.
the Cubs never seem to play well in Arizona.
No, they had it
They
right.
play poorly. Schwarber blew his leg up. There's always like negative stuff in Arizona.
Right. I remember Jake Arrieta hitting like a 440-foot bomb in
Yeah.
Arizona once, and Zobrist maybe hitting a go-ahead double down the right field
Hmm.
line there once. But obviously, there was the terrible playoff sweep that happened there in one
Yeah.
of those good late aughts years.
Hmm.
So yeah, this was a nice day in Arizona as the Cubs took 2 of 3 from a historically bad team.
It was, and so quickly too. Like it looked like
Hmm.
they had nothing going at all, and then I guess it was Ortega doubled, and then
Hmm.
Chirinos first. And Chirinos, I mean, it's pretty pathetic that a guy who's had 7 at bats is the best backup catcher that we've had all season.
Yeah,
Just
I
with the
mean,
home run and then that hit. I mean,
absolutely. And I mean, Chirinos, who, by the way, was a guy who signed with the Cubs originally. He was an
mhm.
original Cub and then made his way off. I can't remember if he was a minor league free agent pick or Rule 5 or in a trade, but somehow he left. He was never a hugely highly regarded prospect, but he's been a pretty decent major league caliber catcher who's bounced around a little bit. And yeah, I mean, it just shows you what a quality backup catcher could have done for this team if we got one earlier in the season
Right.
after dealing Caratini as part of that Darvish trade, because he's competent back there, and that has been such an upgrade.
Can you name off the top of your head everyone who has been a backup catcher for this Cubs team?
That's this year. That's a really good question. What was your favorite part of the Austin Romine era? Would you say? I mean, God bless him. He got hurt. There's nothing you can do about that. But
Nothing against Austin or Andrew Romine.
or
We
Andrew
respect
Romine.
all Romines.
Yes, all Romines. So him, PJ Higgins, who I still think
Mhm.
I still think PJ Higgins can be an interesting backup catcher. A little bit of
Yeah.
a line drive bat there, takes some walks and has some athleticism behind the plate. So but then we had
Tony
uh,
Walters.
Tony Walters, who had, I believe, 2 stints up with the
Mhm.
team, right? We did not now remind me. Coy Hill has still been retired, so he didn't pop in there at any
I
point,
believe
right?
Scott Service is still managing the Mariners, so he's not
Yeah,
involved.
I think so.
Paul Bako.
Yeah, Paul Shaken Bako, Shaken Bako.
Henry Blanco, aka Hank White. I'm sure
He,
he's coaching somewhere.
an all-timer for a backup catcher. He's great.
Probably doing translations that are not great.
Yeah. Yeah, who else am I missing here? That because I mean basically the thing is it's forced Wilson to play every day, you
Mhm.
know. Who else you got?
I was kind of curious to see who you remembered and who I remembered. I hope that's it, but I'm sure we're missing someone. But speaking of Wilson Contreras, he comes up, hits a 2-run homer down the line, and all of a sudden, a game that looked like it was over
Yeah.
is over in the other direction. Kimbrel comes in and gets the save. And then last night, I don't know if you watched the game. I was watching the NBA Finals and was kind of like periodically checking the score. And then all of a sudden, after the Bucks had won, congratulations to Milwaukee fans only if they exclusively like the Bucks and not the Brewers.
Yes. Happy for
Hopefully, Kato
Giannis. That's
Kalin. I'm hoping Kato Kalin is a Suns fan just because it would be funny.
yes.
But
That would
yeah,
be.
did you watch the Cubs game last night? Because what the hell?
I watched how it ended afterwards. I was watching the NBA Finals. Taylor Gushu, by the way, that's one we missed. Taylor
Oh,
is
nice.
that's I just thought of him. But the yeah, I saw how it ended. So yesterday, right, we had that great game in Arizona. Love to see Wilson Contreras, who he still cares. You know, I think all these guys still care, but love to see him getting a big hit like that. And then the game against St. Louis yesterday, it was 6-1 going into the ninth in
Hmm.
St. Louis.
Yeah, and that's the kind of game that usually the Cubs are the team up 6-1 in St. Louis going to the bottom of the ninth, and something horrific happens involving Edgar Renteria.
I mean, I was personally at a game out here in Queens when the Cubs, I believe it was Dempster, blew a 6-1
It
lead
was, yeah.
against the Mets, right?
Yep.
We were you there too?
I was not, thank God.
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
actually
it's a good one
shocked
to
I
miss.
wasn't. I've been at so many horrific Cubs
Hmm.
Mets games.
Yeah, that was an all timer for me for sure. But yeah, and things just started. I mean, by the Cubs kind of taking some walks
Hmm.
is how it worked. It was just like professional at bats, one after another. There was no like big homer in the midst of
Right.
this 6-run ninth to come back and win 7-6, and then Hall of Fame all-time closer Craig Kimbrell closes it down after that. But I mean, there was no, they just sort of kept chipping away. And Alex Reyes, who previously had set the record for most consecutive saves to begin a year with 24, had that streak broken in the next game. So
Yeah.
that was crazy to see. And I guess the final blow coming from an Ian Happ double down the right field line,
And that's
which
got to
was awesome.
feel great for Ian Happ.
I mean, Ian's been bad this year. We all know this.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think there's the level of hate I see online for Ian Happ is interesting, I guess. I mean, because he is a guy who's put up a very good major league career to this point.
Mhm.
He's versatile, he's athletic, and he has some real offensive upside that he showed last year, showed his rookie year, he's showed throughout.
Sometimes leaves something to be desired defensively, but
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you ideally wouldn't want him playing in center field, but he's probably fine to plus in a corner, and he doesn't kill you in center field either.
mhm.
But Ian Happ is a guy who's going to be important going forward for the Cubs because, I mean, we don't know who's going to be on this team going forward, for one thing. And I understand being excited about the prospects the Cubs have, but for people getting real excited about Cubs prospects, just so y'all know, Brennan Davis, I mean, appears to be a stud. Fingers crossed. Besides him, there's no one in the system who has Ian Happ upside as an outfielder
Right.
anywhere near the major leagues, just FYI. So it's easy to dream on guys who we haven't seen on the major league level because they haven't struggled, but they also haven't had success and proven they can have success. And Ian Happ is still a guy who, even after this terrible year, is 8% better than average if we're going by OPS plus throughout his career. And that's really weighed down by this year where he's 28% worse. Otherwise,
Mhm.
I mean, he's coming off a 133 and a 129 in his last 2 years. He's still only 26. So I guess, you really love to see Ian Happ come through with such a big hit in that moment because of how hard this year's been. Also, you just really want to see Ian Happ get back to being the Ian Happ he has been to this point because that could be a key piece in future Cubs winning teams.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you do wonder if the incident of like hitting himself in the face with the baseball had any impact. Like it seems like there is kind of a direct difference after that moment, but
There is, yeah.
um otherwise I guess my only speculation would be that podcasting about baseball makes you worse at it. But I mean, I was 4 for 4 on Monday, so
I was gonna say we I guess we'd have to crunch the Fangraphs numbers on your Gotham Comedy Club softball team stuff, but yeah, I mean that's also got. I did wonder before the season specifically, like if Ian struggles, how much will it suck for him to have committed to be doing a podcast?
Totally.
Because meatball fans are going to be like, oh, he's too worried about being a media star. Adam and I can tell you podcasting doesn't take that much effort. And I bet it takes even less for Ian than it does for us, honestly. So that's not the problem. But having to speak about it basically it would be the equivalent of you and me doing an interview show after like bombing at comedy a lot.
Right.
If you're new to the show, Adam and I are stand-up comedians. Boom. Welcome. Thanks for joining. So yeah, it's just been a very weird year for him, and it was nice to see him get such a big good moment.
Yeah, and for Kimbrel to just keep being dominant, because that would also be a very at least formerly Cubsian thing, is to like have this dramatic comeback in the ninth, and then the closer blows it, and you're like, what was the point of any of that?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So it was nice to see him do that, both because it was fun, and even in a year when the Cubs are not going to make the playoffs, I think we can feel pretty comfortable making that prediction now, both with performance up to this point, their standings within the league, and also what the direction looks like it's going to be. It's still fun to beat the Cardinals.
Always. It's never not fun to beat the Cardinals.
No. And one of a big Cubs Twitter person, Taco Aficionado, was, I think, at that game yesterday. So God bless. That must be, we obviously, Adam and I both know we're the away fans at so many games. Like, it just feels so much better and less aggressive from strangers when your team wins as you're leaving. It's a much nicer mood to be in,
I also love the idea that there were probably some Cardinals fans who left after the 8th and heard that on the radio on the way home.
Absolutely. That's just beautiful. And in this season where it's the first in a long time where we're at this early in the year, we're like, okay, we're probably not a contending playoff team. I don't know about you. You can look back at the end of the year and be like, well, we didn't go anywhere anyway. We should have lost all the games and gotten the best draft pick, whatever. And there's truth to that, and I understand it. But I don't possess the emotional ability to watch a Cubs game and hope they lose. You know what I mean? Like,
no.
I don't care if it's better big picture. When I'm watching, I want them to win, and every day matters. Every season matters, so
even if they sell off completely, I'll still root for them to pull some bad news Bears nonsense and somehow be good.
Still. Yeah, and beat better teams and beat teams that matter. And it's just more fun. It's a more fun way to spend 3 hours when your team wins. So I think that's a good thing for you to point out, that even in this sort of real down vibe we have overall right now, which is understandable why it's a down vibe. It's coming from reality. It is still nice to get these great moments.
Right. And the only other thing I had before we get into your Ricketts breakdown is just after we recorded last week, Jock Peterson was traded, which I guess it can't be surprising when anyone on a 1-year deal is traded, but for some reason he wasn't somebody that I really assumed would. But from everything that I've read, and you're more of a prospect guy than I am, it seems like who the Cubs got in return, Bryce Ball, is frankly a pretty good return for half a year of Jock Peterson.
I think so. And what we're looking at in Bryce Ball, just to give you guys an overview, if you don't know the prospect that the Cubs are just now getting back, Bryce Ball is a huge dude. He is 6'6", 240 is what he's listed at, out of Dallas Baptist, which the Cubs have been picking some guys from that college. So it seems like they have scouts focusing on that area. Burl Caraway also came from the Dallas area as well. So it seems like maybe the scouts had an eye on this guy going back a few years, and he has not been great this year, but he's been playing in High A, and he is now with the Cubs High A team in South Bend. He's a first base DH prospect, I think is what you're looking at. I think ideally this is a guy you look at where you're like, okay, the DH is coming. Maybe this is a guy who can DH and play first base on an off day, ideally, at one point. He's 22 years old, and he, depending on what ranking system you look at, he was somewhere between the 11 to 20 range in Atlanta's system, which was a pretty good system. So you're looking at a guy who he hits left-handed, throws right-handed. As I said, 6'6", 240, and he's really been an offensive monster in 2019, 2018, down year this year. But it looks like there's offensive potential there. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Fun name, don't sleep on the name. I could already see like a obvious shirt that's like, America's pastime is Bryce ball. That's fun.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Like ball don't lie, of course, and then it's just him saying a fact, a little voice bubble with him like saying something that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think for a half season of Jack Peterson, getting a high A ball prospect, he's 22 years old. So he's not advanced or behind for the level he's at. He's sort of right where, sort of a normal trajectory age-wise. It's fine. There's upside here. He's not a sure thing to make the major leagues, but you can dream on sort of I'd almost say like a Dan Vogelbach is what you're thinking about here. And obviously guys can break out, guys can be it can be, who knows what'll happen. But for a half season, Jack Peterson, that's not a bad flyer, I think.
Yeah, and if somehow Bryce Ball does make the majors and he does make an impact and he's a really good player, LeVar Ball will take credit for it. Are they related? No. But
yeah, right. He stayed inside a lot as a kid, so that's why he looks like he does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a Ball possibly being the Bulls point guard going into the future. You plug your basketball podcast. You do a lot of basketball talking on the air too.
Yes, please listen to Horse. It's at Horse Hoops on Instagram and Facebook, at Horse_Hoops on Twitter, because someone has Horse Hoops and we don't know why. But I would love to have Lonzo Ball on the Bulls.
Me too.
I'm all for it.
Absolutely. And so what I'm saying is we're hoping to have 2 balls in Chicago, is ideally what you want.
At least 2 balls.
And you can definitely see the commercials there. So whatever, we're dreaming on that. That's the only trade we have to dream on so far, but it seems like more trades are coming up here. We've seen reports this week that, was it, I wish I had it right here. It was either Heyman or Passan. Passan is better. But one of these guys said that Bryant is virtually a sure thing to get dealt. That Chris Bryant's virtually a sure thing.
What does Nightingale say?
Yeah, exactly. Then swerve the other way on that. I don't know. I haven't seen a Nightingale weigh in on that yet. But I mean, here's my feeling overall with the core guys going forward as we approach trade season, and we'll do a deeper trade podcast coming up, I'm sure. I don't know that trading any of the core 3 to me is going to be worth it in prospect return for a half year. I'm unsure that that's going to give you more value than having an exclusive negotiating window with them until the end of the season, and right after the season ends. And then if they do sign elsewhere, you get the qualifying offer draft pick, which is after the second round. I would need to see a legitimate, exciting return to feel good about dealing any Bryant, Baez, and Rizzo, and I'm not going to feel good about dealing any of them because the Cubs have $80 million on the books going into next year, and there's all this talk about, well, the Cubs can't afford to keep all 3 of them. They absolutely fucking can. The math is what it is. They absolutely could afford to keep all 3 of them, and I need to see a compelling reason why they shouldn't, and I haven't seen that.
Well, does that lead into your Ricketts segment?
I guess it does, because I think we saw on Twitter today, there was a little bit going around. Michael Cerami wrote a thoughtful thing for Bleacher Nation, and I saw I don't even. It's funny that I'm like online friends with this guy, and I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Ryan Thomure or Tomure, I don't know, but I saw both of them talking a little bit about how like the Ricketts have spent, they will spend again. And there was some discourse about that online. And I just want to say, they've spent sometimes. I don't know why we're giving the Ricketts this much credit, assuming they will spend. Yeah, they're going to spend something. Sure, that's not the issue. The issue is spending to the level that your team, that your income, and that your competitive window dictates that you should. So this is the issue, because yes, they've had a couple of years with pretty high payrolls lately. But let's look at it. In 2009 is when the Ricketts bought the Cubs. Okay. And when they did it for $700 million. Currently, the Cubs are valued at $3.36 billion. And the difference between that, humans can't even fathom, really. You kind of can't. So
I'm not a big numbers guy, but that sounds like a pretty good ROI.
you're coming close to quintupling the value of the franchise you bought 10 years ago. So Cubs payroll rank, when they took over the team, the payroll was third in 2010. So that was their first year owning. I mean, that wasn't their choice. Those players were there. They knew what they were buying. And I'll go year by year. Third, sixth, 15th, 14th, 23rd, 15th, 6th, 8th, fourth, second, third, and this year is 12th. Now, you notice there's a run there from 2016 to 2020 where the payroll was higher. Do you remember anything about those years? Like
between a few things
between 2016 and 2020, like
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Some division championships, a World Series win. Yeah, 12th this year. The performance this year? How you feeling about it?
Not great.
Okay, so maybe there's some correlation to spending and performance. And in 2015, they had the 15th highest payroll, and we had the surprise, the beginning of the ascent.
Real quick, right? And I don't want to derail the momentum.
No, please.
When the hell were they 23rd overall?
2014. And here's the thing. So if you average it, their ranking via payroll in the league, it comes out to, during the Ricketts tenure, the Cubs' average payroll rank is 9.25, which places them in the 9th to 10th highest payroll in the league by ranking over that time. That's not nearly good enough. And when we say the Ricketts spend sometimes, they spent during that contention window. They were raking in the money in the other windows. They were taking the profits in those other windows, and those years count too. And as Cubs fans, we were okay with the teardown and rebuild back then, and we were okay with that for a few reasons. One is because we knew the talent wasn't there on that team to contend, so tearing down, doing the tank, and not paying for free agents who aren't going to be playing on your next good team, I think we all accepted that. That made sense at the time, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt? Like, I remember, like, I feel like Gordon Wittenmeyer, who I actually like, I think better than average generally, but I remember a lot of articles like wanting the Cubs to spend on short-term free agents at that time that I didn't agree with. Like, I was okay with that tank.
To be honest with you, I remember being annoyed. I remember being pissed when they traded Samardzija. And that's the trade that got them Russell. But that was also the trade that Theo was like, this is it. This is the last trade. We are only buying players from now on. We're not trading anymore. But I think I felt like you did, and I remember going to that game in, I think, 2014 where Javi hit that blast in Citi Field right by where we were sitting. And we were so excited at that time because at least I'm all right with a bad team if I don't feel like the team's direction is rudderless. If I can see what they're doing and I can see what they're building up towards, I'm cool with it. If they're just kind of flailing around like it kind of feels like they're doing this year, and they're just 500 for the sake of being 500, and they're not intentionally rebuilding and like garnering and gathering resources to put into the team and developing the farm system. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. And we were excited about that time. It was, and Theo talked about that too. Like, the on-field product for the Cubs, Major League Cubs at that time was not great. But meanwhile, they're in the press box being like, watching what's going on in Tennessee and watching what's going on in Iowa and be like, people, I don't know if people realize, but we're going to be really good.
Yeah, and they were right at that time. And so I say this to say, I'm okay with a teardown rebuild if that's what the talent that you have in your organization dictates. That made all the sense in the world to me at the time. They had no discernible way forward with major league players. Spending would not have fixed the problem. The team was a mess back then. That's not what the team is right now. That isn't. We're coming off a division championship. The three core players who are reaching free agency this year are still in the midst somewhere of their primes. I mean, you can. I'm fine to accept if someone wants to say Anthony Rizzo seems to not be in his prime anymore. I think there is more there, but also I think that's a fair argument. Fine. Baez and Bryant, Baez, who's been really hot offensively lately, and has also seemed like he's changed his approach a little bit. It makes no sense to let these guys go because you don't want to pay the money for them, which you have the space under the competitive balance tax, which, by the way, isn't even a real cap. You just could keep spending, and they have the money to. But let's use that as a cap. They have well over $100 million to spend under that cap going into next year. So they could keep all three of these guys. And they're here. They're guys who I believe they've been on record. They would like to stay in Chicago, those 3. If you want to swap them out for baseball reasons, I'm fine with that. If you want to swap them out to lean into a more long-term rebuild more, I think that's horseshit, and that's pocketing money while using an argument that doesn't make any sense. And I think it's a great point that you pointed out that Theo back then was like, oh, but we saw what was coming up. We knew what we had on the horizon.
Right.
He was right, but also at that time, the Cubs had, everyone agreed, the Cubs had the best farm system in baseball at that time. They had stars stacked up in that top 10. I mean, that is not, I'm excited about the Cubs prospects right now. I think they've done well in the last couple drafts.
And we finally have some pitching prospects, which is nice.
We do, and we're finally developing pitching too, which is great. This is nowhere near the farm system that the Cubs had back then. Brennan Davis looks amazing. Great. Futures game MVP. He's doing great things. He's not a Chris Bryant level prospect even. I mean, I think this is something we forget, like, is the level that these guys that we have on the Cubs, what their careers have been, what their careers can still be. We don't have anything in the farm system that is a one-for-one replacement that keeps the Cubs at an elite contending level. You have to spend money to keep your talent and bring in talent while supplementing that with what you have in the farm system. And I guess I just want to point out the Ricketts have ranked between 9th and 10th in payroll during their time with the Cubs. And we were fine with the rebuild when it happened because it made sense for a lot of reasons. But they made that profit, and that money is to be spent now and going forward.
Right, and the whole point that you're making, obviously, is that like 9th or 10th is fine for a mid-level team.
Yeah.
But the Cubs, over that time and over the Ricketts tenure, have made how many teams have made more money than the Cubs over that time? Maybe the Dodgers, Yankees, and Red Sox. If that, it can't be a lot more than that.
No, I think that's. I mean, the Cubs should. They should be top 5.
Right, and at the very least, the expectation as a fan should be that wherever your team ranks in terms of money made, your team should rank in that same spot or higher in terms of money spent.
This is what it is, and the Cubs have the highest ticket prices in the league. We all know how expensive it is to go to a Cubs game. A little bit of that is supply-demand with how many seats are available in a smaller ballpark, but I mean, if this is
I've seen enough snake cups to know how much money they're making off of concessions.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the thing, and that's the standard we should hold the ownership to. It shouldn't be, they spent a couple times and they've had a high payroll in the past. Yeah, that's fucking default. It would be, I mean, it would be fraudulent if we were sitting 15th to 20th. That's not, nobody thinks that's what's happening. Yes, the Cubs have paid some players. That's not to be patted on the back. That is default expectation there. And to be peddling this shit about we can't afford, we can't keep all 3. Horseshit. You absolutely can, and you should, unless there's a better baseball option to go get right now. This team should not be taking a year off where they're not contending any beyond a year like this one right now, which could be akin to the Yankees reload, the year in 2016, right? When they dealt Chapman. So this is all to say, we don't know what's going to happen at the trade deadline. It's coming up July 30th is the trade deadline. But we should keep this in mind in terms of what we expect from Cubs ownership and what we expect from them to do in the offseason going forward, I think.
I think that's very well said. Let me before we wrap up, let me ask you an unknowable question, but I'm curious to see what you think, right? Because coming off of last season, there were a lot of guys who struggled, but ultimately the Cubs did win 34-26. They won the division, which is something. That is an accomplishment, right? So let me run you through some hypotheticals.
Yeah.
If instead of everything that happened this past offseason, the Cubs don't do the Darvish trade, so that means Darvish is still here. That means Caratini is here, right? They re-signed Lester instead of Arrieta. They
Yeah.
re-signed Schwarber. They don't get Jock Peterson.
Hmm.
And rather than adding like a Trevor Williams, they signed Taiwan Walker.
Yeah.
Just those minor differences. Where is this Cubs team right now?
I mean, I think that's a first place team, right? I mean, like, it's not like John Lester's been amazing, but he's been better than what the Cubs have gotten in Arrieta. And I mean,
Also hit a fucking bomb to center field the other
hit
day.
an absolute tank, and we simply love
He
to see
griffied
it.
it. He griffied
Yeah.
it.
Oh, as we said when he was still 0 for his career, we were telling people he can swing.
He looks hitterish.
The
He
swing,
looks hitterish.
it looks, yeah, he's got a good base. Yeah, I mean, look, the Brewers are good, and this is something we called from early on this year. I definitely remember saying I don't see how the Cardinals are better than the Brewers. I think the Brewers are the biggest competition in the division.
Mhm.
They look to be an even better playoff team than a regular season team with those three
Right.
studs at the top of the rotation and two at the back end of the bullpen. I mean, also when we're talking if the Cubs hung on to Darvish, we're not talking about Darvish replaces Davies. That's Darvish replace. I mean, he would, but also that's Darvish replacing whoever the worst starter in the rotation is. You know, I mean,
Right.
so yeah, to me that is a first place team, and then it's still contending, and maybe it's not good enough. And okay, like I think they made the choice to try to move on from things. You know, from where they've been the past couple of years, and we've all thought this team needed a shakeup. But I think what I disagree with at least is the way it was shaken up. Darvish, you had an ace for 3 more years under contract, and that's another thing when we talk about the contracts the Ricketts have agreed to since Jason Hayward, possibly worst for the dollar free agent signing in history in Cubs history. They signed Darvish, yeah, they paid for 3 years of him.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not give it full credit there. They signed Craig Kimbrell. Yeah, that was because Ben Zobrist got divorced and forfeited $8 million.
Oh my God, how have we forgotten to talk about that?
I know, Juliana Zobrist. You're a bad person. You're a clearly bad person. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think your hypothetical.
The thing that's so frustrating. It's like
yeah.
The Cubs traded for Jose Quintana. And one of the big selling points is this guy is under team control for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have that in Darvish by doing it themselves and objectively making the right decision by a mile, signing him over Arrieta, which is essentially the decision they made. And then you trade him.
Yeah.
The best pitcher on your team compared to Kyle Hendricks, who's incredible and might win 20 games this year.
Mm-hmm.
And you trade him for... I need to do one of those tweets where it's like the handshake thing. It's like this thing, that thing,
yeah. What
they have in common. Like me in high school, me as a Cubs fan, just relying on 17-year-olds to make my dreams come true.
Yeah, it's a good tweet. It's a good sentiment because also, yeah, it's different years and like the market changes, I guess. But Jose Quintana has never been Yu Darvish. Jose Quintana has never been peak Yu Darvish.
I knew Yu Darvish, and you, Jose Quintana, are no Yu Darvish.
No Yu Darvish. You know you. So yeah, if we traded Darvish, a much better player at the time of the deal and overall than Jose Quintana. If we traded him for Dylan Cease and Eloy Jimenez, we'd feel better about it. So it's like the Cubs got I mean, who knows? Preciado and Owen Casey could be amazing, but I mean, even at the moment of the deal, the value doesn't come close. So that's also depressing and makes you a little skeptical going into the trade deadline. But the only trade we have is the minor one, Jock for Bryce Ball so far, and that the response to that, I think, after you look into it, you're like, all right, that's fine. I'm not going to be okay with an all right, that's fine for Bryant, for Baez, for Rizzo, you know.
No. And final thought, I think I was going to say, I think you and I both remain cool with Kimbrel being traded, especially if you can get it's the exact situation that the Cubs were on the other side of, trading for Aroldis Chapman and giving up Torres and whoever else they gave up in that trade. So if there is any world in which the Cubs can get that kind of return for half a year of Kimbrel, who Other than maybe like Rodriguez on the Pirates, I don't think there's anyone tradable who's even in the conversation
No,
for.
and that's a huge step down too.
Yeah, enormous step
Not
down.
only talking about the name and career and the track record of Craig Kimbrell, who's top five closer of all time, probably. Is the owner of one of my favorite stats I mention all the time: more saves than hits allowed, which is crazy.
It's astonishing.
It's crazy. Like he yeah, that, but also how he's pitching right now. And post sticky stuff crackdown, he's still fine. There's not, you know what I mean? So that's another thing. So yeah, I'm fine with that. And for people who say like, oh yeah, but Kimber also has the option for the going into next year. It's a small buyout and also 16 million for a year of Kimbrel. I mean, let him opt out. He'll get that, like that's not
Right.
that should be, that's extra value. And I think Brett Taylor's been beating that drum over at Bleacher Nation too. That's extra value on this deal. It's not just 6 months of Kimbrel. It could be a year and a half at market value for an elite closer. So yeah, that's going to be, if any of the core three get dealt, we all think Chris Bryant's the most likely. But if any of the core three and then Kimbrel, then that should be, I mean, what it has to be is the equivalent to that Samardzija deal you mentioned earlier. It has to be, this is the last one. This has to be the last one like this for the next 5 years or so, where you're trading this deeply from the present of a contending huge market team for some unknowable future in the distance. So we'll see. It'll be, in some sense, exciting, I suppose.
There will certainly be plenty to talk about. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Cool. Any plugs or parting shots before we leave here, Adam?
Nothing, man. You got anything?
No, follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I guess I'll plug. I do a weekly show. If you have a Sirius XM subscription, you can catch myself at a very funny comic named Sean Donnelly. We do a show at 4 p.m. on Sirius XM 99 every week. Today we have Michael Rappaport, and we talk basketball, we talk movies and stuff like that. So if you want to hear me and Sean talk to funny people, and Adam's been a guest on that show in the past as well.
I have. Sean Donnelly and Kevin McCaffrey, a duo that can only be described as cartoonishly Irish.
Oh yeah, potato Blarney Stone, baby. Let's watch Cubs maybe win something or just do something fun this week. Thanks everybody. Bye.